event is really unique because it's a really special time for us to celebrate new teachers. We throw them this party to celebrate them actually making the decision to not only be a teacher, but to be a teacher here in Polk County Public Schools. We get all dressed up. We have a sparkling cider toast at the end. We're hearing from our superintendent. And it's just really a great time for teachers to network with each other and then get to experience some local restaurants as well.
I am incredibly excited about the fact that new teachers get an opportunity and just really feel like they're celebrated. I think oftentimes we get into the initial start of school and things are overwhelming and they don't really have that opportunity to say, hey, I'm here, I'm officially hired with Polk County Public Schools and I'm a part of the family. And so to be able to have that feeling and to be joined by a lot of different individuals in the district, it kind of really feels like the support is surrounding them physically and literally. So I'm really excited for them just to feel celebrated, supported, and valued before the start of the year.
What's really powerful about them getting to make these connections early on is that we know that teachers feel isolated, especially new teachers. So for them to get the opportunity not only to be able to meet other new teachers, but to be able to meet district staff that they are getting to put a face to a name, it really just makes it all come together for them and let them know you're not in here alone. We're here to support you and celebrate you.
A reception was held at the Polk Museum of Art to welcome international teachers to Polk County. The reception was hosted by TPG Cultural Exchange, the organization who recruited these international teachers and helped them get working visas.
We at TPG believe that when you bring cultural exchange teachers to the classroom, everybody wins. The teachers, the students, and the schools. Essentially what we do is we recruit international teachers from all over the world who are qualified, experienced, and ready to work when they come here to the United States. And the community here in Polk County has absolutely welcomed the teachers with open arms. And the teachers have in turn responded to that and been able to really engage and focus on the teaching and the students because so much of that other support has been provided to them.
McLaughlin is blessed. We have 14 teachers in our math department, our ESC department, science, as well as language arts that are from all over the world. What I see in my students is an awakening, is an excitement to be able to hear a different dialect or a different accent when a teacher speaks. They're intrigued and they want to know more about their culture, about the food that they eat, the music that they listen to. They don't just bring their expertise in the classroom, but they really seek to build relationships with our students and bond with them before and after school as well.
This year, TPG recruited 50 teachers from multiple countries to work in Polk County Public Schools, serving to simultaneously help with the teacher shortage, bring a global perspective to our schools, and give these teachers an opportunity that they could not pass up.
Well, I wanted to teach, especially in the US, because I wanted to take my career to the next level, challenge myself a bit, and learn more strategies.
It's the culture that attracted me here in the United States of America. Ever since when I was a kid, it is already my dream to be a teacher here. And with the cultural exchange that PPG is offering, I managed to have a chance to be a part of the cultural exchange that the sponsorship by TPG being done.
For more information about the TPG Cultural Exchange, visit polkschoolsfl.com/news.
You have to own who you are. You have to own your feelings. And when our feelings, situations get the best of us, we're not realizing what we're portraying.
Right, right. Because you're deep in that emotion.
Yes.
Right, and it's very real. Whatever experience is fueling that, and then what experiences then are we creating for our students who are experiencing us acting out like that?
Hello, I'm Fred Hyde. And as the new superintendent of Polk County Public Schools, I am truly excited that our district is creating a new strategic plan to help improve our schools and better support our students, families, and community. I want to thank everyone who was able to attend some recent community forums held throughout Polk County. We had some fantastic conversations together, and I really appreciate that you took the time out of your busy schedules to share your thoughts with me. These forums were only the beginning of how you can help us develop our next strategic plan and to help, more importantly, shape the future of our educational system. A new survey has been launched to get your thoughts on what you believe, what skills, attributes, traits, and characteristics are most important for our graduates. And we truly want to hear from everyone. We want all stakeholders in our community to share their thoughts on how you feel we should be preparing students for success in their lives. You can access the Portrait of a Graduate survey by visiting polkschoolsfl.com. This survey is based upon the framework established by Battelle for Kids, a national non-for-profit organization that collaborates with school systems to improve learning outcomes. The survey contains a list of 30 possible qualities or competencies. The most effective way to fill out this survey is to carefully read all the definitions first. Trust me, each one sounds equally great. What we're asking you to do is to select the 10 most important or valuable competencies for a student to possess upon graduation. If you don't see an important competency on the list, don't worry. You can add up to 2 of your own, but you must provide a detailed definition to accompany those terms or phrases. By completing this survey, you're helping to guide the development of our strategic plan. We will compile this feedback, inform the community of its results, and design our strategic plan's goals to target this vision for our graduates. Also, please encourage others to visit polkschoolsfl.com and fill out this survey. Thank you for helping us take this important step to help transform our schools and better serve our students.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to call the Polk County School Board work session for November 9th, 2021 to order. Thank you for those of staff that are in attendance and our guests as well. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Superintendent Hyde, who will walk us through our work session today. Superintendent Hyde?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the board, members of the staff and community. Thank you for being here today. So we'll begin today's superintendent's report or workshop today with several reports from the superintendent's office. So I would ask Mr. Pitts and Ms. Heather Jenkins to please come forward. The first item before us, I apologize, excuse me. The first item before us this evening or this afternoon is Ms. Candy Amato. She'll come forward. This is the charter review for Achievement Academy and Berkeley Accelerated Middle School.
All right, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So before you, in a separate PowerPoint in a folder, you do have today's PowerPoint presentation about Achievement Academy and Berkeley Accelerated Charter Renewal Applications. So this is the Florida statute that we're governed by. I'm not going to read it to you, and it's actually only screenshotted for a small snippet. I do have the complete law if you want to know the nitty-gritty, but just so you know, that is what we followed when we did do the renewal process. The renewal process looked very similar to what we did last year for Cypress Junction. Obviously, when we scheduled this, COVID and the Delta variant were running rampant, and our charter schools have a much smaller staff, office staff, and resources to pull for substitutes. So we tried to be mindful in regards to sending in a huge review team to walk their campus and go through their classrooms. So we kind of modified it a little bit. We did provide the documents and requests in the summer. They provided us all of the renewal documents after Labor Day. The documents were then shared with the charter review team. The charter review team was invited to attend or set up any small group sessions with the school should they have any questions or concerns. The charter review team, we convened to discuss the findings of all the submitted documents. And then we held a Zoom meeting with the actual charter schools to discuss those findings in more detail. And then we present to you today a recommendation of the charter review team. The superintendent will make a recommendation, and the board will vote in December, and then we can move into contract negotiations for the schools. Just a huge shout out to the charter review team, as if they don't have enough on their plate while they were trying to juggle COVID and covering classes. They did step up and review documents and participate. So I would be amiss if I did not send them a huge thanks. So this was the review process. We identify 3 glowing items, and that is the program an academic success? Is it a viable organization? And do they fulfill to the terms of their charter? The schools that we reviewed have been around for a very, very long time. So going back to their original application required a little bit of digging. So we're going to start with our first school, which was Achievement Academy. Achievement Academy opened in 1997 as a charter school. However, they have been around far longer than that as a private entity organization. They do have 3 locations, Lakeland, Winter Haven, and Bartow. Their current contract expires this school year, so in June. The charter office, we conducted a site visit on the 30th of September. We then held our virtual meeting on the 8th of October, and the school has requested a 15-year contract. These are their demographics, and please note that in order to be eligible to attend Achievement Academy, they must meet 2 requirements right from the get-go. 1, their age, they have to be under the age of 6, and 2, they have to be eligible for ESE services. So these are the indicators that the charter review team looked at: state accountability, educational program implementation, financial management, financial viability, student enrollment and conduct, governance, staff and parents, and facilities. And as you can tell, the review team provided the indicators that they clearly have met all of the standards in each of those key components. So a few of their strengths, I'm not going to read all of them to you, but I did want to make sure you had access to see them. So some of the ones, the campus routines for COVID were huge. You're dealing with students who are crawling, they're walking, they're touching things, they're just all over, it's just everywhere. And it was amazing, some of the classrooms where the students were they weren't walking. So there was a request where you had to take your shoes off before you walked into the room, just to ensure that you weren't tracking whatever germs were on the bottom of your shoes onto the carpets where the little ones were crawling and are rolling around and doing their therapy. So I thought that was important. Although they are not technically assessed the way we're traditionally looking at, they do provide the Hawaii, which is the early learning profile assessment, and they have clearly mastered and met all of their standards based on growth for each of those components. They collaborate with the district on a regular basis, and they have actually continuously been accredited. They're currently accredited by Advanced Ed, but we know that has since changed names. So they have received their accreditation every year, which I think is important, especially for a pre-K program, that they do take the time to make sure that they are considered an accredited program. They do maintain that single point of entry, so they still are bound by all of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas requirements, even with a security guard or a guardian on all 3 of their campuses. They have maintained all of their financial audits. They are transparent. They are not found to be in financial deteriorating conditions. And they have a huge and extensive community support and business partners. And it's very evident when you walk their campus. They have transparent communication between their governing board and school administration. And I must say that there was a large number of their board members that participated in the Zoom call, which I thought was important because it shows that they are still active and they are involved in the decisions that's happening on their campus. So they're strong and active. They have an extremely low staff turnover, which is phenomenal for them. They have indicated that they struggled finding paras this year, but I think that's kind of the story across the board. But knowing that as they move forward and their turnover as attrition and retirements take place, they have actually started to establish a partnership with Warner University to begin that pipeline of attracting teachers to come to their program. And the charter review team made an actual recommendation to renew this contract and this term for 15 years. If that was the pleasure of the superintendent and the board, then we would begin contract negotiations, and the term of their contract would run July 1st through June 30th of 2037. Oh my gosh, that sounds so far from now. So before I jump into Berkeley, are there any questions about achievement?
Ms. Fields.
I just wanted to know, why are they requesting a 15-year contract?
They're requesting a 15-year contract simply because that's actually what they are currently on, is a 15-year contract. We do have that discretion to offer them the 15-year contract. So it just helps with the longevity and continues the growth of the program.
Okay, thank you. I thought they were on a 10-year, so thank you.
Ms. Fortney.
Yeah, Ms. Amato, thank you for answering my questions earlier, detailed questions. I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Your knowledge is appreciated all the time.
Thank you.
Ms. Wyatt.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Is super helpful to have in front of us, first of all. I'm assuming that it was unanimous, given that, I know before we've sometimes had a vote count if it's not unanimous. Was this the unanimous decision of the committee, or were there any?
I believe there, I'd have to go back and double check and confirm, but I'm pretty sure it was unanimous of 15 years.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Ms. Miller.
Thank you for this presentation today. It's not a secret that I support Achievement Academy. It's the only medical model therapy school we have that serves significantly disabled students, and they do it very well. I'm actually encouraging them to grow. If I ever convince them, or the community sees a need and they're encouraged to grow beyond pre-K, what would happen? Would it be a separate contract?
To grow beyond a pre-K program?
Yes.
Yes, it would be something we would have to entertain in regards to, is it something we want to expand their contract? But they would still need to provide additional information on what their curriculum, what their budget was going to look like, so it'd almost be a whole separate application.
And I just want to make it clear that's nothing they've suggested. It's the community's response to the need for this type of school, for that K1 and 2, especially with the change that we've seen in access curriculum, that the community's in desperate need for something similar following these kids into elementary. So the community does support this school. They've always never had a trouble fundraising, and we appreciate what they do. There's a wait list. So I think that the 15 years is more than acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you.
No further questions.
Okay. So moving on to Berkeley Accelerated Middle School. So they opened in 2004. They are a startup charter. They are located out on Berkeley Road, if you have not been there. Their contract does also, similar to Achievement Academy, it does expire this year. District staff, we hosted a boots on the ground visit on September 29th, and then we had our virtual session with the charter review team on the 6th of October. They too are seeking a 15-year contract. So BAM's currently, they're approved to serve up to 600 students in grades 6 through 8, and those are their current demographics. And then this is their student performance, obviously dating back to the 14-15. I couldn't go all the way back. It doesn't fit on the slideshow, so I just gave you enough data. So as you can see, with the exception of last year where there was not a school grade assigned, they are an A school consistently. They received their high-performing charter status back during the 2010 and 2011 school year. And the exact same standards were used to measure the indicators, and as you can tell, the charter review team unanimously agreed that they are meeting the standards in all of those components that we evaluated. Again, lots of strengths to address with Berkeley, so I'll just hit some of the highlights. Their mission and statement is still in alignment with their application, even dating back to 2004. Their classrooms have an extremely inviting environment. Walls are painted, they're print-rich, there's flexible seating. When you walk in, you just can't wait to sit down and learn. So they do a phenomenal job tapping into those components. They do have a trauma-sensitive classroom, and they offer PD to their staff to ensure those who are experiencing loss and stress feel comfortable and supported at school. And obviously during times of COVID, they have seen that increase significantly. So they do offer those areas for the students, and even sometimes the staff can take a break. The school collaborates on a regular basis with Polk County Public Schools. In fact, after our Zoom meeting with the charter review team, assessment, accountability, and evaluation, along with the senior director of mathematics, reached out and wanted to meet and speak with Mrs. Bolander in more detail about their acceleration points and making sure that they are maximizing and they're targeting the correct students based on student and school grade and calculations. So there's constant open door communication. They do have a strong application and robust waiting list, and I was pleased to hear that they do reset their lottery at the beginning of every enrollment period. That at least does provide the students with a glimmer of hope of getting in, rather than realizing you're number 600 and the chances of getting in sometime in 8th grade maybe. So I thought that was important. They refer to Marzano as their Bible. That is what they use, and that is what they preach in their classroom. In fact, they have 2 of their staff members who have been identified as Marzano high reliability teachers, and they are very proud of that program. They use it faithfully. It is intertwined in their daily instructional life. And obviously, they do provide a strong focus on social and emotional well-being of the student. Similar to achievement, they've made financial transparency. They do not have deteriorating conditions. I thought this was a great piece of their single point of entry. You have to be buzzed in from the parking lot. You don't even get to the front door. You don't get to the sidewalk. You literally park your car and you are buzzed in from the parking lot. So that was the first I had ever seen that, so thought I'd share that. All their inspections are current, and they have extensive community support and business partners. Again, they had a significant amount of their board members participating in the Zoom call, which to me shows that they're active and they're strong and they're consistent in supporting the program. In fact, their board chair serves as their soccer coach in the intramurals, so I thought that was a nice tie-in. The principal is the founding principal. She's been there since they opened, and their AP has been there for the past 16 years. They also have an extremely low staff turnover. They lose approximately 2 teachers per year. So some recommendations, and some of these were brought even forth by the principal during our review. They recognize that their bottom 25% of students in math didn't make the learning gains that they had expected, attributing it to part of it being the students learning virtually, and that being a new adjustment for both students and teachers. So now that all students are back on campus, they have made the focus, and they have highly qualified teachers providing instructions in that intensive math in hopes that they're meeting the needs of the students. They've also increased their online tools and tutorials for at home and for those at-risk students. The charter review team made a couple recommendations, and that would be to consider developing a pipeline of diverse candidates to interview should a vacancy occur. It is a little difficult to have that diversity of a pipeline when you're only losing approximately 2 teachers per year, but just something for them to be aware of. If you look at their ESE and their ELL data, it indicates that there has been some small growth over the few years. The charter review team made the recommendation to explore ways to increase equitable access for all students. They have recognized part of that is a language, and so they have started creating their flyers in both English and Spanish to use throughout the area, and they are working on creating a business plan that will help increase the diversity in their school. Now, the charter review team, again, recommended to renew Berkeley Accelerated Middle's contract or charter application, providing them a 15-year contract with the terms of the contract beginning July 1 and ending July 30th of 2037. So, any questions on Berkeley?
Ms. Wyatt.
The same as with the other, do you happen to know what the vote was?
So
And if
the
you
vote
don't, if
was,
you
the
could
vote
just-
was not unanimous for 15 years. There was a split between 10 and 15. However, Berkeley is a high-performing, so they will more than likely request their 15 years and based on statute, earn their 15 years.
Gotcha. If at some point you could send us what the votes were, that would be helpful just for our knowledge. I just wanted to say thank you for including the breakdown for ESE students and taking the gifted out, because that tends for a lot of our charter schools to really bolster those ESE numbers. But I did appreciate that they had several strategies that they were looking to for increasing diversity across the board. The only comment I would have with the flyers is maybe to also include Creole might be some feedback for them, just because we know that's our second growing language in the area, and that may help with some of their African-American population, because those numbers seem a little low. But other than that, thanks for putting all of this together. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Ms. Miller.
Thank you. Berkeley is in my district, and it is very much supported by the community, and I can tell you that Ms. Bolander is very welcoming. If you have not toured the campus, I suggest this board do that. I've been there and saw the work they were doing. As far as being more inclusive, they are working towards that. If you could explain a little bit for our newest board member or other people, the feeder school was a conversion charter, and it has a zone.
Correct.
And so that is somewhat, it makes it difficult, a barrier, because those kids are feeding right into BAMS, and BAMS wants to extend their programs. She even talked about having different units to help students who need learning supports. But when you have a charter conversion with a zone, it makes it more difficult. So how could we help them in that? Or if that's just something they're gonna have to do extra marketing on?
So that's almost two different conversations.
Okay.
So one conversation addressing the middle school, yes, they could. They want to keep their program small. So finding ways to reach out, different marketing, different venues, transportation sometimes, because of where they're located. So reaching out and providing that diverse training in diverse markets. The elementary component, because they are a conversion charter, the elementary version, and the way Berkeley Accelerated Middle wrote their initial contract. So the 5th grade students at Berkeley Elementary, which is literally right next door, they share a fence line, those students are provided a priority when they apply to middle school. Because Berkeley charter is a conversion and has a zone, the students in the Berkeley zone are given a priority at Berkeley L. So when you're looking at the old zones that when Berkeley Elementary converted, those zones have not been modified to reflect maybe different growth that has occurred in that area, which then has an impact on the 6th grade students at Berkeley Middle. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does,
Okay.
thank you. And the 15 years, Jill has been there since the inception, and I think the quality you see in that school is because of the leadership. So I'm hoping if we extend 15 years, they're confident in the succession plan to have similar leadership
I
within
did
that
ask
time.
what their succession plan was.
Okay.
And they are building their succession plan. They have one in place.
Okay.
They are all learning and growing together, and the succession plan actually helped participate in writing the charter review application.
Oh, great. Okay, thank you.
Ms. Fields.
I had questions, but I think you answered them through the recommendations, specifically targeting the 25% bottom students. I think you answered that. I did want to know if you would have the ethnicity of the board and the staff. Do you have that?
I do not.
Or can you get that, please?
We can reach out to the school. That's not something we collect.
Okay.
Ms. Wyatt.
Just based on Ms. Miller's question, I know we went through this recently with a different charter school. The original zone that they started with when it was converted, they can expand upon that with permission from the board. Is that correct?
Berkeley Elementary, so that's
Okay,
that's
so
why I
it's
said
a
that's a different
different-
conversation.
right,
Yes,
okay.
so that doesn't. Berkeley Middle is a startup charter. They don't have a zone.
Gotcha.
So
Okay, but Berkeley Elementary, if they wanted to, could expand upon that zone with
that would be
permission from the board?
probably a more in detailed conversation. We would probably need to bring in the superintendent, Mrs. Usher, and yes.
Okay, it just may be something to look at exploring in the next few years with so much growth in that area. Thank you.
No further questions. Thank you.
Okay, and then last, so we'll make a recommendation and we'll vote in December and we'll begin contract negotiations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members of the board, there are some additional revisions to work session today. Discussion item A2, the top plan for Griffin Elementary School. The only thing was an announcement that we added an additional attachment. Under superintendent's report, item B4, school construction proposal that has been removed. That will be delayed until December meeting. And then item B5, naming of Cleveland Court Elementary Media Center was added. It was also included within the board meeting, but it needed to be added to the work session as well to allow for discussion. At this time, I'd like to bring Ms. Jenkins and Mr. Pitts forward, who will be discussing the refunding of the COPS 2021 A Series bond.
Good morning. How are you all?
Good morning.
We have a funding opportunity, a refunding opportunity. So the district entered into a refunding arrangement on June 30th of 2017 to advance refund the certificates of participation, which were formerly 2010A and prior to that 1999A. The refunding was accomplished through an issuance of the Certificate of Participation for Series 2017A in the total amount of $26,331,000 to be repaid by the district. Originally, the 1999 project consisted of the construction of Sandhill Elementary, Pinewood Elementary, Berkeley Elementary, and Ridgeview Elementary, and in addition to Lakeland Senior High School. The district is proposing that we take advantage of this refunding for a savings of debt. Our financial advisors circulated an RFP to get proposals for that. Responses were due September 23rd and reviewed. PNC Bank National Association returned the best rate to refinance this COPS, refund it. So the district is requesting that the board enter into a fixed forward rate lock with PNC Bank National Association. Since we first became aware of this opportunity, rates have continued to rise, therefore decreasing the amount that we would save. So what we're asking the board today and what will be on the workshop later is just your permission to enter into a rate lock to secure that rate. We will then work to compile the rest of the documents and bring that to the board at the December board meeting for your review and approval. Our savings at this time are estimated to be no less than $200,000. We're hoping there'll be a little bit more than that. Initially, it was closer to $295, but as the rates go up and down, it does change. So that's what we want to ask today so we can stop that and secure our rate.
Any questions? Mr. Wilson.
I may have missed it in here, but what is the rate they're offering?
Excuse me?
The rate that they're offering on the refinancing?
That is a variable rate at this time. It's close to, I believe, 2.65%, but it has gone up and down, and they can't guarantee the actual rate until we enter into the rate lock agreement.
Do we have an estimate what we think it might be?
We think it'll be it's probably going to be over 2.65% now, and we think it will save at least $200,000. As soon as we obtain your permission and formalize that, I can let the board know the final rate prior to the board meeting on the 14th.
Thank you.
If that would be okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Allen.
Great, thanks for the information. I was just curious who actually holds the current certificate. What bank? You know?
I believe it's U.S. Bank. Most of our certificates are through them.
Okay. And the $200,000 is over the span of the full certificate?
Yes, sir. The repayment dates will be the same, so we'll still repay that in 4 years, which is our initial ending date. We're just trying to initially we're lowering the interest rate to have savings on that payment. A couple years ago, we used to be able to enter into things called advanced refunding, and they changed the process, and districts are no longer allowed to do that. So now we just have to watch for opportunities for savings. So that's what we've done here.
All right, thank you. Mr. Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Ladies and gentlemen, there's also a related item on the attorney's report that I'll be bringing you this evening. The attorneys that are representing us in the transaction also have, their firms have historically represented the bank involved in the transaction. They have requested waivers of potential conflict. We have routinely, the board has routinely approved those in the past. Both firms have indicated that they can competently and diligently represent the district. The rules of ethics require them to fully disclose those conflicts to each client, which they have done. They've represented that they've already obtained the waiver from PNC Bank, and they have asked for the school board to do that and indicated that they can preserve the confidentiality of each client. Those requests, the privilege belongs to the school board, so I brought them to you for a vote this evening. I'm recommending that you grant the waiver.
I don't see any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jean.
Next item before the board is an update on Hazel Healthcare. I'll ask Dr. Lutz to come forward just in case there's any additional questions as I go through the presentation that we cannot address or I cannot address. So if the board recalls, back in August or even late July, we approved the adoption of Hazel Healthcare to provide both physical health and mental health supports for our students. As we get prepared to launch, communications went out to families last evening about the consent form. We cannot treat anyone without consent. The consent allows for both physical and mental health services for our students. It is a comprehensive form. It does ask for prior medical issues. It does ask for any existing medications that students have access to or are currently utilizing as part of their prescriptive care. However, the whole goal of this was to eliminate the barrier to many of our families as it relates to access of timely health care and or timely mental health care. As you know, there's a reliance to go external for schools. We can only provide prescription medications that come with a doctor's prescription that are provided to us on our school campus, and our school LPNs provide that service. However, many of our families may not have access to health care when their child initially starts to show symptoms, either because of a financial barrier and or because of a timeliness barrier. The family may not be able to get an appointment in a timely manner. Being a new resident here in Polk, I can attest to the fact that trying to establish oneself with a new physician is rather difficult, and it's a lengthy process, and scheduling is really far out. So for families who may not have, again, the financial wherewithal or the timeliness because their work schedule may not be conducive to taking their student or child to a clinic after hours, there may be a language barrier, there may be other issues that prevent timeliness of care. Hazel Healthcare can provide that in school. What's also interesting about this is even though a family may not consent to treatment during the school day, that does not preclude them from participating with Hazel outside of the school day. Parents can still call, they can still connect with a virtual physician in real time and still seek services. All of this happens with ongoing communication with the family. So even though the family provides a consent on the front end for their child to be treated and diagnosed or evaluated by a physician, and then subsequently can receive some over-the-counter medications, again, just to clarify for everybody, the only thing that Hazel provides in those medical carts are over-the-counter prescription or over-the-counter medications, not prescription medications. If a child requires a prescription, they will refer the child to another either to another physician of the family's choice, or they can actually provide the prescription in real time virtually. They can send it via email, they can send it to the school to be printed out to go home with the child so the parents can pick up that prescription later. And so again, they are limited in their scope of what they treat. This is not intended to catch everything. This is not about turning our schools into walk-in clinics. It really is about that immediacy of response. And we are hearing some great stories coming out of some of our partners. Duval County launched this a few months ago. They'll be discussing it at their upcoming board meeting and mostly discussing the powerful stories, the success stories that are coming out of this, especially on the mental health side. But again, to reiterate, even if a family says, I don't provide consent for my child to be treated during the day, they still have access after hours to both the physical care and the mental health supports that they can access from the privacy of their home. And so our LPNs, again, we did approve this in August of 2021. It does provide both telehealth and for both physical health and mental health supports. For our training, we have begun training our LPNs in the Hazel process. So what Hazel did was they white glove serviced all of their equipment. So everything is done automatically, weight scales, blood pressure cuffs, everything that could be utilized, thermometers are all digital and really readily facilitate their use. But all of that was unpackaged, put together, including the medical carts that are locked, and they are delivered to our schools with the iPads. All our staff have to do is verify in the system whether or not a student has received authorization for treatment. Even in the instance where a family has provided authorization of treatment, we still initiate contact with the family. So there's never a time where we will not initiate an attempt to communicate with the family prior to allowing them access, even with the consent form. The consent can be revoked at any time as well, but we did begin training our LPNs on this process. And for the schools, we do have a handful of schools that currently don't have LPNs. However, this project has started to garner more attention, and the team are confident that some of our existing staff may apply to fill those LPN vacancies if it hasn't started already. And so our LPNs were to conclude training as of last week. There are a few that we had to reschedule some training for, so they'll be trained this week. The carts are maintained by Hazel Healthcare. There's a constant flow of information to our LPNs as far in the means of support. There's an online university to have access to. Additionally, they all went through their basic training, but then the Hazel team will be visiting sites consistently throughout the rest of the year, not only to check the inventory and make sure that they're renewing and refreshing anything within the carts that's being utilized, but also to check in with staff and see how things are progressing. We have an agreement with PEA and with our administrators groups to make sure that this remains an ongoing conversation. There are always going to be hiccups anytime you implement something new like this. How do we best address this? The beauty of the program, I should have also highlighted, it's available to our families in multiple languages. There is no language barrier to our families that would preclude their participation. We just launched our Consent to Care campaign that launched last evening, and so families were informed of this. They were provided, not only did we make a telephonic phone call or call to families, we also sent an email with all of the links. There is now a link on a web page on our landing page on our district website that also includes additional links so that if families or community members want to get more information about what services Hazel can provide or what they won't provide, all that information contained in there. It's very user-friendly. There are multiple videos that can be watched. And so really the whole goal is to encourage families to participate to the extent that they feel comfortable. But I'm going to keep reiterating, it is voluntary. It is not required of students. You must have a consent in order for your child to be treated this way. Outside of that, you have access to it outside of normal school hours by virtue of the websites and the links that we provided. And again, we only treat the students who we have consent for. And what can be treated for physical health, this was included. We can treat headaches, allergic reactions, heartburn, acid reflux, constipation, insect bites and stings. Very simple things. Again, all over-the-counter type medications that we can prescribe. Some questions came up during the initial conversation, town hall meetings with our LPNs about contraindications where different prescriptions might interfere or there might be an adverse reaction with others. That's why there's an actual physician on the line who asks those questions and ensures that if the child is receiving any form of medication, that there's no contraindications or anything that would cause any concerns as far as allergic reactions or whatnot. For mental health, we can actually treat quite a few issues. And if you recall from the initial presentation from Hazel, one of the benefits of this is that if they identify a student through a conversation for telehealth and mental health, more importantly, there's an automatic referral process. They are also mandatory reporters. They know that if a student at any point indicates self-harming behaviors or an intent to harm others, they must report that to both law enforcement and to other agencies. Hazel has already established a working network here locally for the referral process because Hazel guarantees a minimum number of support treatments number of sessions. But then beyond that, should the student or the child require ongoing mental health supports, there's a formal referral process that will ensure that that takes place. And so the family doesn't get dropped. And it's a partnership between us and Hazel and the family. The whole purpose of this, again, was to help take some of the burden off of our staff, let them focus on other issues, take some of these other issues, and allow us to best address them. Again, there are a lot of success stories that are starting to come to the forefront. And again, Duval County being an exception right now, who has actually implemented this already, is seeing some great results, especially on the mental health side for their students. There's a receptiveness and a responsiveness that's been really well received from families, and the feedback's been incredible. Thank you. Ms. Fortney.
I'm for anything that provides a wraparound service for any type of mental health for our students. I am kind of concerned about our staff. Do they have access to it? I know the answer, but I just wanted to. But, you know, it gives the parent the freedom to do that in their own home, or if they don't have access to internet, et cetera, at school. So I think it's well spent money.
Nights, weekends, it's really a powerful option for our families right now.
Right.
Ms. Fields?
Do we have any indication as to how many students have benefited from it so far?
So we just launched the consent form last night. I will provide you with monthly updates as part of my Friday updates to the board. I will make sure that you're included with ongoing numbers, tallies. I will also regionalize those so you can see if there's hot spots, zones. So maybe we need to focus our efforts differently and resources differently to help offset some of those needs. So there's a really good opportunity here for us. But yes, ma'am, we'll provide that data for you. And more importantly, I will provide a lot of those success stories. Because the ones that I've heard of have been very powerful in what we're able to address through this. Ms. Wyatt, I'm sorry, I keep vacillating between your name.
It's all right. You're lucky if I respond some days because I keep forgetting. But so as far as the messaging, I know we sent it out through School Messenger, we sent out an email. Do you know in Duval if they did anything additional from that, or if that seemed to be able to get them quite a bit of traction?
They did not. And one of the things that Hazel did for us that they have not done for others is they just delivered flyers for us to dispense at all of our schools to send home. There's a trifold and a flyer, and then we're asking our schools to follow up with messaging so that we can try and get to that 80% mark. And 80% isn't 80% consenting, it's 80% of our families responding as to whether or not they do consent or not. So that way we know we targeted and addressed the majority of our families to the extent that we can.
Thank you. I know that this is something that typically probably would go in that beginning of the year packet that every family gets, but obviously we've missed that. Is there any opportunity maybe to plug in with some of our pediatricians' offices or get them the information so that they can, I would think it's something that they would be very supportive of and at least letting their patients know.
Absolutely. We can pursue that with Dr. Lutz and his team. We can absolutely do that.
I just
we
worry
can also share
especially
with the health department as well.
Okay. I just worry especially with the holidays of it getting a little bit lost in the noise, and it's such a great opportunity that I want to make sure that we can get it to as many families as possible.
That's a great point.
So,
very valid point.
thank
Thank
you.
Ms. Miller.
I said it on the Zoom call about this program and saw the benefits. I mainly was interested in the mental health aspect of this, but my concern is reaching the parents and for them to understanding just the pushback on social media. What are you doing last night? And the phone calls. If there's a video that they have that shows how to access or something that we could share out so people could see it.
It is all embedded in the email we provided. So every link is in there. Everything is there.
Okay.
So
Maybe they'll click. The other question is for the people, the mental health concerns that I have are the students whose parents are not engaged at all. So is there a plan with social workers or somehow to try to reach the parents just to get them to consent if they would respond?
Go ahead, Dr. Lutz.
Yes, right now the mental health facilitators have been trained on the mental health side.
Okay.
And we have upcoming training for our school social workers as well as our school psychologists. And they'll be trained on not only how to access the system and set somebody up and ensure consent, but also on reaching out to parents when we've identified a student in need. And for the public who's watching, if you hazel.co is their website. I believe that was embedded in the, but there are some informative videos on their website that parents can watch to learn more about the services.
I'll work with Mr. Geary, so long as we can get permission from Hazel, we can link the videos directly to our site, so they don't have to click, but it's all hyperlinked in there, all the information, it's very user-friendly. The format's very simple, but we can see about embedding those videos on our website as well.
I had one other question. It's regarding the younger children. You have a doctor asking them questions about what medications they take. Is there a form that the parents fill out ahead of time that the LPN can help answer?
Yes, ma'am. When I started, I indicated that when they provide their response to the consent form, they actually ask all of that ahead of time.
Okay.
But there will be a confirmation request if they're taking any medicines. At that point, if it was a younger child who says, yes, I'm taking medicine, there would be a follow-up so that we wouldn't prescribe something or necessarily administer something without trying to reach out to the family to get confirmation of what they are currently taking. But for a child, having dealt with this before, asking a child, are you taking any medication? It was like at the beginning of COVID. Is anybody in your house sick? Well, you get all these crazy responses, and then you find out that, no, my dad just happened to cough yesterday, and I assume he's sick. So we do the follow-up to make sure and verify.
I have a 10-year-old. I can imagine these
Yes, ma'am.
responses.
Dr. Allen.
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for the way that this has been rolled out. I mean, obviously, we voted on it in the past. I love the tagline, consent to care, because that seems to be the primary question that's coming up when we look at the social media campaign that just went out. So I think the consent component is very important to parents, and that's their biggest concern. I think your reiteration on the referral process is important as well, because I look at some of the other districts around the United States that have instigated and moved forward with this. We're concerned that there would be a compete with local providers. So I do have a couple questions as well. So what is the process for parents to request credentials of the practitioners? I'm not sure if that's embedded within the system itself. I know as I go and look, for a particular service, I can, look at what their ratings are and so forth. Is there anything like that for parents to see those credentials?
So let me pause you there, because we'll answer them one at a time. Dr. Lutz.
For medical professionals are all licensed, either nurse practitioners or licensed pediatricians or doctors. For the mental health practitioners, they have to have an active mental health license, whether that's as a psychologist or mental health counselor or something similar in the state of Florida. I don't know, but we can certainly find out if Hazel has additional information as far as their ratings. And we can certainly follow up with you on that.
Yep. And that was the next question. Would all the practitioners be in the state of Florida, or just have to have the state of Florida certification?
They must be licensed within the state of Florida.
Okay. So going back to Mrs. Field's comments, looking at some of the data, they were saying about 90% of students within particular school districts had utilized the service within a year. Not to say that we'll get to that number. I thought that was pretty interesting. The other data on this that we haven't talked about is the reduction in health-related absenteeism.
Correct.
I thought that was a really interesting data set. They were saying that actually there was a 40% reduction in health-related absenteeism, which I think is great. And I'm sure we'll be looking at some of those data points as we move ahead. So thanks for the work on this. I think the rollout's been great as well.
Thank you. Ms. Miller.
I had one last question. We have public charter schools that follow our mental health plans and often refer to us when there's an issue and they need support. Are we offering them to buy into this? Is there any collaboration with those schools, or is this just for the standard public schools?
This was just for our standard schools at this time.
Okay, thank you.
However, if they're interested, they could probably piggyback off of our contract and
Okay.
take advantage of it. So, and they would utilize, they have access to the same grant funding that we utilized. So when they get their commensurate apportionment of federal grants, they could allocate those funds equally as we have to cover the costs of Hazel. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Lutz. Ms. Usher, if you'll come forward. So at the last meeting, we had a brief discussion about Belicita. The board expressed concerns and had numerous questions and wanted more information. So I asked Ms. Usher to come back, put together an additional presentation to help address some of the questions that arose last time in particular, especially since the initial drawing we provided you seemed to raise a great deal of consternation about it was overly simplistic and it looked like it was forced onto the current piece of property. So Ms. Usher at the time was awaiting formal documents and draft versions from our architect, and so she's here today to answer any more questions, provide more information about Belicita and the recommendation to expand it to serve K through 8. So Ms. Usher.
Thank you. Good afternoon. And I also want to add that the architect is here, and he'll walk you through those design slides. And I also have the academic staff here, Mrs. Collins and Mr. Duncan. And as the superintendent said, we're here to address all those concerns regarding design. As you all know, Belicita relieved Citrus Ridge, but only at the elementary school level. So the middle school still has all this need to be relieved. If we don't do this, then the students from Belicita will have to go back to Citrus Ridge Middle School, which is already overcrowded. I think with that, I should ask the architect to come up and go over the site plan with you. Alex Perez-Rizkovich.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Sorry, thank you, Alex. But
We're going to transition to a separate presentation.
For you. That's fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure. No problem. Yep, that's the one I sent you. Thank you. All right, I appreciate it. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, members of the board. Superintendent Hyde, great to see you again.
Good to see you, sir.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for having us here and obviously your consideration. Mrs. Usher and I have been discussing this for the last few weeks, and we want to make sure that we looked in depth and studied this further to make sure we provide as much coherent information for you as possible so we can obviously have the best direction. So I took the liberty of putting together a little bit of a presentation to give you a little bit further idea of what we're looking at, and just some very brief, I know we're limited on time, topics of conversation. So first thing we want to look at the actual prototype itself, the building, where it's coming from, what it's providing, and looking from different aspects, architectural, program, curriculum, function, end user, needs, and so on. And then from there, looking at site placement. I know there was some concerns in regards to sites, and then I want to walk you through a further evolution study that's occurred since then. So from an overview, Ms. Usher had approached about introducing the expansion of K-8. So we've done a few of these in the past. Some of them actually been in metropolitan locations where high density, and it's almost had to be inserted into an existing elementary school. Very similar to this. As a result, compaction, efficiency of footprint, and all these different aspects were critical. As a result, we have just a couple here that we're showing here on the screen, and then different functions for each of them. For example, some of them were just mere classroom buildings. Others provide additional functionalities like student dining and kitchen and whatnot. And then just getting a little bit of understanding that there can be further evolution and further speak of programmatic needs. We're looking at the image on the far left, Ogis Elementary, as a starting point. And I think that's one thing I wanted to emphasize is when we speak about prototypes, I like to refer to it as just a starting point. It's something that's a good kind of wireframe that from there we can glove fit later on together to ensure that it encompasses everything you need for academically, functionality, and so on. So here's just a closer look at it. It's essentially a 3-story building, and it has, actually this one had a kitchen and a student dining space as well. As I understand, we don't need a kitchen, so in the more revised version that we'll see here shortly, actually remove the kitchen component and we're able to compact a little bit further the school. Now, going back to just a conversation about prototypes, the school on the left actually was a 3-story elementary school in West Palm Beach, and it was actually the basis of the prototype, for example, on Willow Oak that you see on the right-hand side. So we take an incredible level of care in ensuring that everything is adapted specifically to your needs, and not just from, again, all mentioned before, academically and programmatically and so on, but even what was from a community standpoint. You know, Michelle Townley was incredible in providing us guidance and understanding from color selection and what were critical components from the immediate context. Obviously, a lot of farm areas there, a lot of vernacular language architecturally. So you could see a lot of the little awnings and the canopies, the color selections, the metal roofs, and so on. So it's incredible to see how these two schools were essentially the starting point, really the bones, the wireframe, as I mentioned. But then essentially it was custom tailored specifically to the needs and also the immediate context, the influences. So, and again, just briefly, this is a first story. What we've done is gone ahead and removed the kitchen component and provided student dining, but it does house everything else, mechanical systems, stage for after-school or during-school performances or activities. Obviously a good array of classrooms. I think we have 27 classrooms at this very moment. The beauty of it, once again, is a lot of these designs that we generate, they're very modular. I like to think of them as Lego pieces. So you have an incredible level of flexibility. I'd like to demonstrate something here very quickly. I know we talked about the potential of maybe needing an admin suite specifically for the middle school component. So we can take modules or bays and simply slide them as shown here in the illustration and very quickly adapt to your needs of programmatic function. Second floor and third floor. Second floor and third floor are basically the same. Again, if you need particular spaces, for example, there's a lot of boom happening now with creative labs and robotics, and depending on what's needed as far as curriculum is concerned, we can combine spaces together and create, we call it maker labs, that we've done quite successfully for many other districts. So these are just opportunities I want to illustrate to you that at the end of the day, we can provide a starting point, but obviously there's a lot of work ahead of us, and I think that's where you all are just an important component to really inform us on what your needs are. Here's a snapshot of the gym. As I understand, there's also a gym component that's needed. This is a prototype gym that's been used successfully also as well, and it's state-of-the-art, provides locker rooms, coaches, offices. As you can see, it has a full court basketball, has cross court, expandable bleachers if needed. So once again, a good amount of conversation, but it's a good starting point. Also, to mention, it has a concession and ticketing area as well, and a lobby. So if we want to have it for after-school sports or any kind of activities or whatnot, you actually have an ability there to create a little bit of an entrance and experience. Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, is there any way that we could get a copy of your presentation? I know we're all kind of fumbling, looking through this.
I don't have it.
Ms. Usher does.
Yeah. And can we get the original documents of the images, because we can't
I
read
can't read
anything
this,
on these.
right.
They're 5x7 scaled down screenshots that I have
Understood.
no idea what I'm looking at.
Yeah, there you go. And if needed, I do have a full-size set of drawings for the
Yes.
floor plans
That would
I
be
brought with
awesome.
me, and I can leave here for you all to look at. If you need additional copies or anything needed, by all means, please let me know. I'm more than glad to. For site considerations, and we're almost done here, I wanted just to share with you all the additional level of coordination we've done with our civil engineer and our other consultants, understanding what are some of our site constraints, such as underground utilities that are existing right now following the completion of construction, as well as grading and finished floor elevation and so on. So really at the point here, I want to demonstrate some of the logic and the reasoning on how we made certain decisions. And really, what we've done here is, again, starting point as always, but identified a potential location that would be a strong point. It would be away from any conflict with underground utilities. There is a service yard that's existing for the Belacita School, and the current prototype actually has its own small little service yard. Remember, this is obviously for any deliveries and equipment and whatnot, maintenance. So what we're thinking is maybe interconnecting back to the service yard to have one central location where any maintenance or deliveries or anything else can occur. We don't have to kind of interfere with the rest of the site and providing additional driveways. And at the same time, there's areas where we're looking at for expanded parking to account for the new program. And more importantly, we're seeing conditions or potentials what you have for the grand entrance, for the middle school component itself to kind of make its own, I guess, shine, if you will. And then we have some student courtyard conditions. Again, if you introduce anything like robotics labs, and what we're doing in other schools where, they have solar car, programs that are going on, and you can use these courtyards like outside testing spaces. And then others, at the same time, it creates synergies and opportunities for other students to oversee, and at the same time get them excited about all these other programs. Again, one of many that we can discuss. And more importantly, if you're familiar with the Bellacita site, there's a small leg that it's really useless space in regards to building. And it occurs just, you can see to the bottom right corner. In there is where we're thinking that, although we can't do any building, so to say, because it's rather narrow, maybe introduce like a track as well, like for track and field for the middle school students, and for track meets, and as well as for soccer or anything that occurs within the track. So this is in a nutshell that I wanted to share with you all, a further evolution, a further study, following some conversations, and then following what was shown to you in the initial meeting. And I want to thank you again for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I welcome any questions, if anything.
Ms. Usher, please come back. This is not up for a vote this evening before the board. The board asked for additional information, and we'll get you a copy of the presentation as quickly as possible. I believe Ms. Usher was emailing it to you. Are there any questions in regards to what was presented today or the concept regarding Bellacita?
It's
Ms.
a real
Fields.
large file, so you have to click on the link and download it. I could not send it as a PDF, okay? Just sent it.
Ms. Fields.
My question is, I know that all of this is something that we're pursuing, but what is the final cost going to be with all of the structures that's going to need to be in place to accommodate a middle school? Because I think when you gave us something last meeting, it was like 18 million, I think.
That's
so
correct.
Is that going to be the same, or is that going to increase because of some of the added things that need to be in place for middle school students?
Mrs. Fields, always the gymnasium was in there in that cost. I asked the architect to include the gymnasium, the dining area, and all the other infrastructure and services needed. So that was in the proposal that they gave me. This is just, they went a little bit deeper, showing how it will fit with the parking, with access, with drainage and all those components, but that was all part of the original cost.
So there would be no additional costs that you
The
can
estimate
see
right now
is
is 18 point something, so it will probably, when I bring it to the board, I'll probably, if the board approves, will be around 19 million.
Thank you.
Ms. Cunningham.
Yes, thank you. Just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to come and speak to us today. I think this is a wonderful proposal as we move forward and are experiencing the growth that we are in the northeast area of our county. And I would like to suggest, I know you mentioned perhaps, reducing and not putting dining and stuff in there, and I think you should leave that in there as originally planned. When you look at the buildings and the way they sit, I think the elementary needs to have theirs, the middle school needs to have theirs, and move forward, because I can only see us expanding in volume and never decreasing at the rate we're experiencing. So it'd be really nice to have those separated. So I would just encourage you, I know you said we could remove it and reduce a floor, whatever you said quickly. I'd like to see us keep that in there so that as we move forward, we have the flexibility as our numbers continue to increase. So.
Mrs. Cunningham, for clarification, we'll put a new dining room. The proposal is for a dining room here, and we'll keep that.
Yes.
But the kitchen at Bellacita
Yes.
will also serve the students
I
at the middle.
understand,
Okay,
right, but I was
thank
saying,
you.
do not reduce the
dining
dining
room.
capacity, because wherever you go, it's
That's
always
correct.
needed, particularly to try to get all the kids through lunch, so.
Absolutely. And
Thank
it is
you.
currently included with what we
With
accounted for.
what you had there
Yes,
today.
ma'am.
Okay, so
Absolutely.
just
And thank you
wanted
very much, and it's been a
To
real
be
pleasure.
sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ms.
We're
Miller.
excited.
Thank you. I would like to see the cost associated with, I would like to see the total cost of this combined with the original cost of Bellacita to get a total cost of what that structure will be for us. As well as, I appreciate that you broke down the gymnasium and the dining room in this handout. But the cost per student station, I'm more concerned with academic space than I am with greeneries and canopies, and that's very nice, and we need those. But cost-effective with academic space is my concern as a board member. And so I would like to see those numbers before the work session so we can review them. In case I have any questions, I can get them to you before we're asked to vote on that.
So we have that information. The elementary school is just under 35 million, and with this 18 million. And the reason we like this prototype, because it's very lean. It is good for safety and security. It has the single point, the courtyard is enclosed, and it doesn't have that sprawling footprint and square footage like other prototypes. And that's why we're doing it at Belasita, Willow Oak, and it'll be at the 21C2, because the prototype is well contained.
We'll get you a cost breakdown.
Thank you.
Dr. Allen.
Students go from Belasita to where, high school-wise?
Right now, it's the Citrus Ridge, and then to
Citrus Ridge.
middle school, and then Davenport High.
Davenport High, okay. So the Belasita Middle, they would then feed to Davenport.
That's correct. So they'll stay from K to 8 at the middle, at
Yep.
Belasita, and then go to Davenport
Good.
High.
And then the average cost to build standalone elementary, or in, like the average cost for standalone middle?
For elementary, it is like 35 million, and that's 264 a square foot. For a middle, it's 50, and it's like 284 a square foot. And similar for high school, it's 2 something also. And I know price is going up, but we did hold the CMs to that number, even though, and they did deliver within that cost.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Wyatt.
It's hard to tell from the original drawing of the K-5 building, but where is the kitchen in the K-5 building?
Oh.
Like, how far is it from the dining area for middle school?
What's nice about it, and I don't know if I can have a pointer here that shows up. There you go, good. So the kitchen essentially is here. This is a service yard area, or it's highlighted. And that's where the thought is on even placement, because even from a functional standpoint, you have your kitchen, you have your dining area here, and then this is the dining area here for the new middle school component. So you have ease of use and serviceability.
Okay. I'd love to get some feedback from our school nutrition department, just of what the feasibility of that is. I know it doesn't seem like a huge walk, but when you're making it with tons of food trays multiple times a day, especially with the weather in Florida not always being great and it monsooning every day around lunchtime, I just want to make sure that that's something that is truly feasible and not going to completely rock their world. Would be one of my concerns with that. I am thrilled to support a model like this. I think it's the K-8 flow for each of those schools is important. Is our goal that the fifth graders at Belasita this year will stay at Belasita for sixth grade next year, or is that out of the realm of possibility? Is there anywhere to when would the goal be to add sixth grade?
That's why we're trying to get this done as soon as possible, but based on the time frame, it'll be hard to get it open for August 22. The earliest, I think, would be a December 22 or an August 23.
Okay.
So that the students, we would have liked for the students from Belasita to go straight into their middle school.
Even though they're under capacity, the issue would be programmatically, we couldn't support sixth grade.
Gotcha.
In that
Okay.
transition to middle school. That would be our issue, is they do have some, arguably they'd have some classroom space that could be utilized, but as far as program, middle school program, I'd like to look into it, but I don't think that we could say that we could meet that demand.
So we will have a cohort of students that are going to have to return back to.
At this time, it looks likely, but I'd like to at least look at it and see what we could do.
How are we, I just want to make sure we can get ahead of that and message that to those fifth grade parents now that have had to leave for a year to then go back to Citrus Ridge.
I agree.
And to make sure that we're not going to, if we send them to Citrus Ridge for sixth grade, that those students will not be required to come
they
back
will
to
not.
Belasita for seventh grade.
They will
But
not.
I want to make sure that that messaging goes out on the front end so that
Good point. We'll look
parents
into
know
that
what's
right
going
now.
on. And it's already a big change, but
If the board were to approve us to move forward, I think there's two ways we could address that. Number one, we could address the design issue by moving the cafeteria immediately adjacent to the kitchen and eliminate that courtyard or relocate that courtyard if need be. So this design, everything's tentative, right? Everything is fluid. So if that's a concern with how are we transporting food, I would assure you it would not be outdoors under just an overhang to move food. There's too many, quite honestly, health safety issues that would come up with health inspectors. So we would address those issues. Secondly, I'd like to have the time before we bring this back again with some additional revisions, if we could revise that to show the adjacent cafeteria to the kitchen to minimize the transportation issues. But I'd also like to come back to you with a recommendation for that 6th grade cohort. If there were a way for us to temporarily modify a few classrooms so we could do science, we could do those things, if that's the consensus of the board, is that we could move forward with this design. I would hate to see those students leave and have to be grandfathered in yet another building after having already been in Citrus Ridge once, gone to Belacita, and then gone back, and then, even if you made it a choice for families, it's still a continuous disruption for those students. So I'd like to see if we could meet that need based off their current enrollment and what we anticipate their availability of space would be. I know from a transportation perspective, just so the board's fully aware, we do try and approach this from all avenues. Ms. Usher's done an amazing job engaging Mr. Davis and everyone else to start talking about what are the transportation issues. We've had conversations about differing bell times. We've talked about this, putting the school on its own start and end time so that transportation can be more readily facilitated. So Mr. Davis is part of this conversation as well, and pleased with that. But Ms. Usher's been very aggressive and active in trying to address as many of the questions as were raised last time. You have raised additional concerns or questions that we need to address, so we will definitely come back to you, and you will get it by next week. I'll provide you with a full financial analysis of what it looks like here, what it looks like to build a comprehensive K-8 to begin with, because I think that's a true comparative analysis of what it cost us to build Citrus Ridge with today's market prices, not what we paid previously. I think that's an important thing for us to discern and point out to everyone. But we'll bring all that information back to you. We'll show you the progression. And to your point, if it's approved, we would begin messaging to families the option to remain. So I think for that first year, we probably want to provide families a choice. Do they want to go back to Citrus Ridge? Fantastic, you can do so. There are transfer options they could explore, but if you want to remain on this campus, if this recommendation goes forward, then here's what the school would look like, here's what we're doing. So I think giving families a choice would not be a bad option for us as well.
Absolutely. I just want to make sure that the messaging goes out and that they're not surprised come
Correct.
May what their options are for
Ms.
summer.
Usher's timeline is to begin communicating with all of with Alturas and with Belacita no later than December, January, so that we can get out there, do our community meetings, and start to address any questions or concerns that are out there.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. Seeing no further questions, thank you both. Appreciate
Thank you.
Thank you.
Judd, can we switch back? Thank you. And if any of you have problems downloading the PowerPoint, we'll get you a copy. We're good, sir. Thank you. At this time, I'd like to bring Pat Barnes forward. And so the school board approved the turnaround option plan for Griffin Elementary School previously. Just for the sake of transparency, I did share this in particular with Ms. Fields, as it's her school, her region, so she was directly involved in the discussion. The turnaround option plan is not created by Ms. Barnes alone in isolation. It's actually created by an entire team, the CAT team, as required under school code for differentiated accountability. So the Griffin Elementary School, should they fail to exit DA status this year, the district had previously submitted a plan to close the school and to reimagine the school as an early literacy, early primary grades program serving students in K through 2. So all students currently zoned to that school would be rezoned to neighboring schools. This school would be reimagined, reopened as an early primary school. That was the plan that was previously submitted. I do support that plan. I think from the get-go, it makes a great deal of sense, and we could actually target some early literacy initiatives within that setting. Although I believe we all still continue to have faith that Griffin will continue to demonstrate improvement and that they will exit DA status altogether, but we do have to submit a plan at this time. And so again, as I shared with you, the plan would reassign all students in grades K through 5 to schools with higher academic performance. In this case, the closest schools in proximity would be Sleepy Hill and Kathleen Elementaries, and then Griffin would be utilized as an early learning center serving students in grades K through 2 or through pre-K through 2nd grade. A new boundary and attendance zone would have to be established for the school, and we would implement, again, a new, one of the proposals that's included in the top program is implementing a primary grades STEM magnet program at this site as well, similar to what we have at Winston and other locations. That is the top plan. Are there any questions? Ms. Fields?
I don't have any questions, but I would reiterate what you just said, is that our goal is that Griffin will be able to meet the goal
Yes, ma'am.
of staying open. And looking at the plan, there's some very good stuff that talks about what they have started doing and what they're going to continue to do throughout the year. And there are some highs. If you look at page 3, it talks about seeing an increase in math from 2018-19 to 2021 in the bottom 25% from 43 to 60%. To me, that is large, even though there are some other areas where they need to increase. But again, I think that it is possible.
Yes, ma'am.
And from all indications, the plan talks about the excitement of the staff and education directions being there on site and continuing to provide the guidance that's needed. So I feel confident that we're in a good place and we're going to see some movement. We will see continued movement because movement is occurring right now, and that we'll be able to celebrate at the end of the year. And Griffin will continue to be the school that it can be and should be.
Correct. They were not far off the mark this last year. Ms. Barnes and I were truly hopeful, and we watched with great anticipation. I would say the feedback even from the state team has been very positive as to the progress being made at that school. So I do believe that this year, with having more students back on campus, some of the additional supports that we put in place, after school planning time and whatnot at that school, I guess we all have an expectation that they will exit and not have to implement a plan. Unfortunately, we are on a time constraint that we must approve and submit a plan in a timely manner. So I have the obligation to bring this forward. But Ms. Fields, you're absolutely right. Our expectation is the school will exit and maintain that status and continue to show the improvement that it has over the last 2 years.
I did have one question, though. Ms. Barnes, maybe you can answer. On page, I think it's page 6, it talks about data chats for students. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that works and if the parents are included?
So what the school is doing currently is not necessarily new, but it's really enforcing, making sure that the students know how valuable their work is and that they are trying to do their very best all the time so that we can make those adjustments that we need to do instructionally with them. And so those data chats, if you will, are quick, but they're being held with the students, and then they're having those chats with parents as well. Teachers are either calling them or they're coming in for conferences. They're sending an abundance of newsletters and information home to parents. But the key is to make sure that everyone is aware that we're all pulling in the same direction.
And then the other question that I had, it says that there's an outside company that's doing the tutoring. What company is that? Do you know?
Learning Resource Center. And I will share that 2 things, if I could, about Learning Resource Center. They started with maybe 7 kids. We're up to almost 40. And so we're really excited. They're coming in every week, more and more students, and they are really concentrating on math and ELA, and now we've got more science going as well. But the students are very excited, and so Dr. Craven's done a wonderful job, and Ms. Wells in recruiting students. And then, since I have the microphone, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you, the teachers are just working so incredibly hard. They are doing all that they can, not that they haven't before. Everyone recognizes what's at stake, but no one wants the school to close. So I do want to say that they are working really hard, the teachers and the students as well, and we thank everybody for your support.
Thank you.
Ms. Miller.
I just have a quick question. I appreciate you mentioning the staff because that's really who's getting this work done. What's the total enrollment at that school?
Right now, it's about 340.
Oh, it's higher than I remembered.
Yeah, up a little.
And then what's your staff count, do you know?
Right off the bat, I'm going to tell you 20.
Okay. And Learning Resource, they do a lot for the district. Is that funds paid from that turnaround program, or how is Learning Resource compensated for that?
So there was some grant monies available, and then, believe it or not, Dr. Craven had an instrumental part in that as well. So it's a collage, if you will, of funds coming. I couldn't say just specifically,
Okay.
but I know there's some Title I money in there too.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Barnes.
Thank you.
Mr. Pitts.
Good afternoon, Board members.
Afternoon.
I am proud to announce a pay increase for our professional technical staff, our administrators, and all other non-union staff members who haven't seen a raise. I am announcing this on behalf of our superintendent. In summary, all professional, technical, administrative, and all non-union employees that have not been addressed earlier in the year with pay raises will receive a 2% cost of living adjustment. The reason that we're doing a cost of living adjustment is to also raise our pay scales by 2%. I think we all recognize that our employees don't earn enough as it is, and we like to see that increase, but also to attract others into the district. So we're going to raise those pay scales by 2%. So this group is primarily the district office, our school administrators, principals, assistant principals, and some other non-union staff. This action will be retroactive to July 1st, 2021. The cost of this increase is estimated to be $1.3 million, and our budgeted fund balance will still be in the range of 4.3% at the end of the year. And our employees can expect to see this increase in their December paycheck. Do I have any questions?
Ms. Wyatt.
I was so excited. Will that be the second December paycheck, I'm assuming, for all employees?
Yes. Yeah, it'll be by, they will see it in the end of December pay.
Awesome. Thank you so much to you and your team, superintendent's team, for making this happen. That's a huge win for our staff, so thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just say thank you to our finance team, our HR team, and our payroll team that are working together to make that happen.
Ms. Cunningham.
Yes, and those are my comments. I just want to thank you and your team. This is wonderful news, especially as we approach the holiday season for our employees. I know it's not where we want to be, but it's the beginning of being able to help our folks and put our money essentially where our mouth is and show them in pay raises how much they mean to us and how important it is to recognize their work and efforts. So I think it's wonderful. Thank you for working as hard as you have to get this taken care of, and it's just a huge win-win for everybody in the district. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Fortney.
I already had my phone blow up thanking me because they read it on the thing. And I know a lot of people will be like, what's 2%? Well, it's really about respecting that group of individuals as well, that they also deserve recognition for the work they've done. And quite frankly, I want them to stay in Polk County. I want us to retain, not just attract, but retain. And that's, to me, the best way to do it is to pay our people. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. What you're seeing this year, and again, we are in a very fortunate position that because of the way the district's been managed in the past, we have the revenue that's going to allow us to move forward and start to address these issues. But we've tried to do it comprehensively across the board. We cannot elevate salaries to the point where we'd like them all to be by next year, because our salaries have been suppressed for so long because of our funding scenario. And now with growth and other opportunities, there'll be opportunities for us to begin to address this. And so as we're having conversations, the conversations we're having is, where ideally do we want to be? And then how do we get there? What's the timeline to get there so that we can manage it financially? Offering raises without offsetting with new revenue or reducing our expenditures so that we don't find ourselves having to RIF or freeze or do those things. We want to operate in a fiscally responsible manner. So I agree, 2% is not enough for any group because of where our salaries are as compared to others. But it's a first step. And what we hope to do is keep chipping away at this incrementally over the next 3 to 5 years, and then it really amounts to something. But to Mr. Pitt's point, moving the base salary starts to work just as we did with teacher-based salaries, the state did across the board, good, bad, or indifferent. It elevated the profession, it elevated that starting salary, and made it a competitive wage and a living wage for many. We need to make sure we're adjusting all of the non-union group members as well. Many of you have heard, and you've forwarded those emails to me, and we're continuing to evaluate all of those scenarios where someone feels like their job that they were hired under 10 years ago or 15 years ago is no longer the same job they perform, and there has to be a reevaluation of their position. So all of that will be happening, and as in addition to which, we're addressing how do we staff schools. So what you're seeing here, again, 2%, and I appreciate the way you phrased it. It's important for us to send that message that we are attempting to address these things, but there are, I'm not going to say competing interests, but interests that will run side by side. Salary increases alone without providing additional staff to help address the needs that we have. I'll use counselors. Counselors can't be staffed to 1 to 350 or 1 to 400. They can't be effective in that regard. So you can offer raises, but in the same regard, part of what we have to do is make sure that we're staffed appropriately, and so that we can serve all of our students, because that lessens the burden. Salary alone, in most studies, is not the top three issues that employees point to as far as job satisfaction. They want to be respected, they want to have a voice, and they want to know that there's additional resources to help them with their jobs. If we can accomplish all of that over the next 3 to 5 years, we will lead the state. I will say that. Morale, culture, retention. So the topic we brought to you last time about reinstating the sick leave payout, we showed you how financially that's not really going to be as punitive as it looks initially on paper. All of those things send a strong message. And I want to reemphasize and reiterate, this is not just building leaders. These are our cafeteria managers. These are everybody in a managerial director role that's in a non-union group. This is a very large group. And so to be able to do that for all of them is a great start for us, and hopefully something we can continue as we move forward. And great job to Mr. Pitts and his entire team. They've worked around the clock to make this happen, because I've been on them about it. So.
And thank you, Superintendent, for bringing up the sick leave payout, which is a significant movement for our employees, our long-term employees. And also just a reminder that we held employees harmless on the $6 million increase for our health insurance. So that really is a raise for our employees also. So thank you.
Ms. Miller.
I like that you're positive thinking ahead, because that's where we want to be. I think that's where we're going. I just know the lift it's going to be for your departments, finance departments, to talk about the equity issues we have in non-union salaries and the equity issues we have in even job descriptions across the same lateral positions. So I don't expect that to be overnight, but I am thankful that there's a timeline for that and that people are working towards that, because that employee morale, that's the biggest hit to it, is when they find out someone else was hired in with a change in job description to make more. I get calls all the time. And I just think part of a large organization is HR, an oversight of what that looks like. And so I appreciate that being taken on. That is going to be a heavy lift. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, we were well established and we set the stage for success, so thank you. Ms. Fields.
I think what Ms. Miller said is very relevant. I think all of us are getting calls, wanting to know about equity as it relates to staff positions and duties that they're performing. So we've had discussion often about it, so I know that we're headed in the right direction. And so this is just the beginning of other items that we need to continue to work towards.
Yes, ma'am. And part of that, to your point, because I mentioned it a moment ago, and I had this conversation with other board members as well who have brought these issues, we do need to do a comprehensive job study for each position again. And that was something that was identified previously, but because of COVID and other factors, we just never got to all of them. But we do have to review those. And there are people now who are supervising For example, I know of one in particular supervising 42 people, and their pay grade is not commensurate with others. But what we hope to be able to do is bring a comprehensive reform and request to the board rather than all these singletons, because we're chipping away. And one of the, I think the biggest point of frustration for both Mr. Pitts and myself and the team is how do we collectively find out who all these people are and what these issues are, and so that we don't end up having all these singletons that keep popping up, these individuals. And so we've developed a strategy to go back and look at how many people have requested a job study, how many people have requested adjustments in their service credit, how many people have requested military service. So we're working through with Dr. Barrios and others, how are we going to pull all that information together so we can, again, comprehensively bring a recommendation before the board to adjust that. Additionally, HR will have to go through some job studies. They're going to have to, and we're not going to contract that out. We'll do that internally. We can pull job descriptions from other districts. There's plenty to select from, but we can also interview our employees to find out how their job has shifted, what new duties do they take on, because as we advertise job descriptions, what's become apparent is some of the duties that are still listed in some of our job descriptions are no longer functions of that role. They've been transferred elsewhere, or they're no longer a main focus. So now's the time for us to be able to clean that up a little bit. So it's a great opportunity for us moving forward. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pitts.
All right, thank you.
And I also wanted to provide the board with an update as to the Portrait of a Graduate survey. As you know, as we look ahead to developing our strategic plan, we have another workshop session scheduled in January. Part of this is that portrait of a graduate, what are the skills, attributes, qualities that we're looking for out of a high school graduate. As you recall, we're surveying various stakeholders. We launched on September 29th. We provided that based off feedback and requests from the board. We ensured that we covered all of our primary or main languages of English, Spanish, and Haitian Creole. Throughout October, we continued to collect, and even through early November, we continued to collect this information. We've really promoted and marketed this rather aggressively through social media, email, district-wide automated phone calls. We've reached out to community partners, Polk Vision, others, and asked them to help share this message. I have been privy and invited to multiple Rotary meetings, chamber meetings, where I've been asked to share about this topic as well, and we provided them with links, so thank you to each of you who have helped me make those connections within the communities. And so it's really been important. It's highlighted as well on our district YouTube channel and on our homepage, and it's posted on a hub as well for our employees. The original survey deadline was October 30th. We have delayed that and postponed that. We want to continue to request additional responses. We had about 2,500 responses at the time. I will provide you with a summary of that data now, but also with the understanding that we're extending it through November 30th because we feel that we've gained more traction as of late, especially with some of our outreach partners who are going to be marketing this for us as well. So right now, of the percentage of people who have responded, primarily almost 1,900 responses have come in from parents and guardians. That's comprises 75% of the total responses thus far. Polk County residents, about 45% of the total respondents, of their responses, 1,154 responses to date. So right now we're at 2,543 total responses, and so we're excited. We're starting to see more, and we're doing a little bit more aggressive outreach on the student side as well. I was a little disappointed that we only had 63 students responding. We did not initially target elementary schools. We're allowing parents to address with their elementary child and ask them those questions, but we will be pushing out more messaging and asking high schools in particular to ask students to provide us with that feedback as well. So again, we're excited. You see the breakdowns there. Our faith-based leader organizations, 83 responses, 121 from our nonprofits, from other community members, 125, from our business owners, 209, and from former graduates, 522. So some of these numbers are really exciting. And I'll be really excited to provide you with a breakdown by subgroup, stakeholder group, as we promised, and then comprehensively show you what the top 10 concepts were or ideas were from all of them. Here's a gender breakdown. Female respondents primarily dominated by our ladies, with over 2,000 responses there. Male respondents 379, and then 141 preferred not to answer.
By ethnicity, we provided you with a breakdown as well, so you can kind of see how we're getting responses. This will also help drive some of our additional marketing efforts. One of the things in particular, and I know that Bishop is here today, we're going to be asking more of our faith-based organizations to share this through their church groups and their outreach groups as well, so we can make sure that we're getting as many respondents as possible. Again, it's important, and I will use this opportunity because it's not really for your benefit, but it's really for the community at large benefit to hear me say this. This benefits everyone. This survey, regardless of whether or not you have a child currently here or you've never had a child in Polk County Public Schools, the reality of it is your life is going to be touched by a high school graduate at some point. If you end up requiring medical assistance, the hope is that that is one of our graduates. And we all have an interest in ensuring that when we graduate students, that it's a high-quality graduate that serves all of our needs and interests mutually. So it's really important that regardless of who you are in our community, that you respond to this survey to the best of your abilities, because we want to hear from you. We really want this to be a very transparent and inclusive process so that the board can provide me with direction as far as the overarching goals, and then I can work with my team to help ensure that whatever these objectives are, that we're working as aggressively as we can to meet those expectations of our stakeholders. So again, it will remain open until November 30th, and then I will provide that summary to you. It'll also be provided at the December board meeting for our stakeholders. It'll be posted on our website, so we're excited to be able to share this information with everyone. Again, I'm going to ask you, ask everyone who's listening, ask everybody on YouTube, ask all the staff here to continue to reiterate and message this across the district for us. We want to hear from everyone. Thank you. Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the next item. And that's, as you know, we started to incorporate this into the workshop, and this was a request from the board that I address and provide a greater level of transparency and clarity as it relates to contracts that exceed $1 million. In this case, there's a contract before the board this evening for Head Start services. This is a renewing grant. And so it really allows us in the Polk County School Board is the governing board of the Polk Head Start Administration Grant. This is a recurring fund, and so these dollars are spent exactly where they belong within our early childhood programs to help us target our students and ensure and address their needs. It's 98% funded enrollment at 942. The absentee rate was at 15.5%. 2.1% of the mandated 10% services support students with disabilities, and total meals served through this program were 41,411. Any questions on the Head Start services summary? Seeing none, Madam Chair, members of the board, that concludes the workshop presentation for the superintendent.
Thank you,
Mr. Wilson, I apologize.
Sorry.
I have a question about the informational items.
Yes, sir.
I noticed that on the financial statements, we closed the year with an unassigned fund balance of 8.1%, and we're projecting 4.32 for this year. So my question is, what caused that decrease?
Mr. Pitts, Ms. Jenkins, please come to the mic.
I mean, I think I know, but I'd like to hear from you.
One of the reasons that we closed the year with such a high fund balance was due to our vacancy rate. So we did have a lot of funding left in that. We also were able to spend part of our ESSER 1 dollars to reimburse the district for expenses we initially paid out of general funds. Whenever we prepare our budget each year, we do prepare that budget with our fully staffed. And we also have prepared it, including an increase, because things such as supplies, fuel, we're having issues with all types of materials. Some of those costs have gone up between 5 and 21%. So it's us being cautious and trying to predict the fund balance to the best of our ability. As soon as we hit January and February, we'll be able to tell you more closely. We do get the third calculation in December, so we can see the official results of the Family Empowerment Scholarship dollars that will be, could potentially move out of our FEFP. It's a pass-through. We'll also see the McKay dollars. We'll see if there have been any other changes in FEFP. We get our tax payment in November and December, and we'll have more of a history of our expenses in order to use to forecast that. So that's our budgeted fund balance, and I think Mr. Pitts has discussed with y'all before, and I may have brought it up, that there's a difference between a budgeted and an actual. Budgeted includes everything, every expense that we think we may incur, and actual is based on everything that happens in the year.
So the 8.1% includes lapse,
Yes, sir.
and the 4.32 doesn't.
Correct.
Do we have a rough idea what we might expect in lapse for the coming year?
It's typically and historically been about 2%.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Fields.
On the monthly financial report summary, page 1, it talks about there being a $10 million loss on the self-insurance. Can you all expound on that?
Yes, ma'am. Our claims have been up over the last couple years due to several high-cost claimants. Also, we have not increased, or we don't have an employee contribution, so we have increased the board contribution a little bit. We are watching that and maintaining it, but we will need to come back to the board and discuss our health insurance plan and what we need to do to manage the costs. And per your request, we have a portion of our COVID-related claims that we're submitting for our ESSER 3 application to see if we can get those reimbursed in order to put those dollars back in the health fund.
Thank you. I just think that we really need to keep, as you said, keep a watchful eye and make sure that we are aware.
Yes, ma'am. We meet monthly to discuss the expenditures and how our claims are tracking. And it's pharmacy and medical claims, so we do watch those. And Ms. King, myself, Mr. Pitts, and our insurance providers are looking at ideas and solutions that we can bring to help better the plan and its stability.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Hyde. And now, board members, we come to the part where we review our agenda for this evening. So I'd like to open it up for any questions on our consent agenda for tonight from items H through L. Any questions on consent agenda items H through L? Okay. Seeing none, let's move forward with items M, information technology, through Q, teaching and learning. Any questions? Ms. Miller?
Madam Chair, I have a question on M1, the Black Glove contract. What I understand this contract to be is to receive the iPads, the 40,000 plus iPads that we're ordering, have them unboxed, labeled with our tracking labels, cases, and then sent out to the schools. Have we done, I'm just looking at, because I've been asked about this contract and the cost, have we done that in the past with other curriculum or materials where we have a third party distribute for us?
We've done some of that with our HP devices and imaging and etching and things like that. In this particular case, the cost savings for our personnel to try to do this is huge, because when we had the 5,000 devices that we ordered during COVID, literally it took weeks to get this done. So they will unbox, they will tag, they're actually going to put SAP stickers on them. They'll put the screen protectors, they'll put the cases, and that takes an enormous amount of physical time. So we think this is a very good investment. Plus, they're also going to provide some expertise in managing. This company has a lot of experience in managing very large deployments, so they have a lot of expertise in that area as well.
So there'll be site dropped at the schools.
Yes.
They're not going to come back here in mass quantity.
No, they're delivering, they are boxing, delivering, and they will ship us the information.
And is the postage included in that, or is that
Yes.
an additional cost?
Nope,
Okay.
this is complete.
And the idea is when they get to the schools, the students have some kind of ownership of those, and they're not just handed to them like a textbook, because we lose so many devices. So I don't know what the plan is for that, but if you wanted to email that out later, the accountability factor in handing out 40,000 iPads.
We are absolutely working on that plan.
Thank
So
you.
part of that will come forward as a whole comprehensive approach is how we're infusing and integrating technology into classrooms in a meaningful way. It's in really where the accountability is going to be for families for lost, stolen, or damaged devices, as well as where our own accountability is going to be as far as reporting those in a regular, ongoing manner. So I would prefer we not do that in isolation of the comprehensive approach to how we're going to do this, because as I've said before, while and kudos to Dr. Barrios and her team for getting that very large grant that's going to allow us to do that. But quite honestly, purchasing devices is the easiest task of everything
I agree.
involved.
Yeah.
Training staff, training students, training parents on how to best utilize it, and also to dispel the myths or misconceptions that oftentimes surround a one-to-one deployment, that students are literally going to be sitting in class just staring at a computer all day. That is not what they're going to be doing. Also making sure that our teachers have the supports that they need, because every one of them is at a different level of comfort with utilizing technology as part of their classroom experience. So the training, that's going to be the heaviest emphasis for us. And you're absolutely right. The logistics of tracking and managing devices and being able to secure them after the fact and where the accountability is going to be will absolutely be outlined, because families will have a contract that they'll participate in as well. So all of that is forthcoming.
I appreciate that, because it's meaningful engagement. We can check a box and hand them a device, but if we don't have a way to engage or there's not follow-up.
Correct.
Yeah, the most important thing is what's happening in the classroom.
Right, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Wilson.
Thank you. So the next item on our agenda is the Phase 3 network build-out.
That's what we talked
In the
about.
range of $6.5 million
Yes, that's what we presented, that's what I presented a
Last board
couple
meeting.
weeks.
at the last board meeting. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Dr. Allen.
Yeah, I was just going to go back to the black glove contract. I mean, I thought that was impressive. That's 40,000 units to deploy. And the services included software updates, application load-ins on each device. And, I think, I just want to say thanks. The way that we are tracking the devices, and this is probably just only one scenario, but I remember talking to an elementary AP that was just saying how they were tracking. And obviously with Find My iPad and all these different applications to be able to track devices, we're utilizing so forth. But I was asking if they lost any devices in the midst of COVID, and they're like, no, absolutely no devices were lost. However, they did have one that they tracked down in a warehouse, right? And then they were addressing it with the parents that were then in the middle of a move and so forth, and then were able to get that device back. So, I think that accountability is there, so I just want to thank you for the work on that as well.
Thank you. Ms. Wyatt?
I have two. Just going off of the Black Glove contract, I know that every network manager is so excited about this, just from being in the schools during COVID and them trying to deploy their devices to not also have this on top of that. Are we going to be, I know at the start of COVID, we partnered with the Sheriff's Department to basically put a BOLO out to any of our facilities where they might try and resell some of these devices? Is that a continued partnership? So once we get new devices, those will go on that list as well?
We do partner with them, but I will tell you that the system that we're using, JAMF, and the enrollment process, it is literally a brick to someone who doesn't work in the school system or isn't a student, because they can't do anything with it. In fact, we've actually surplus some, and we didn't know, our JAMP team didn't know, and it's still enrolled in our system, and they thought it was actually stolen. We just didn't take it out of the system. So, and I will say kudos to the team that manages that. Our ITV team does the large lift. They've done a great job in some of the development, the applications and things that they've developed. But it literally is a brick out on the street. So in the iPad situation, it's actually much better than on the Windows. It's a little harder on the Windows because they can literally take the hard drive out, but they can't do that on the iPads. So
Good to know.
We feel good about that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And then Superintendent Hyde and I spoke a little bit yesterday about the out-of-state field trips, because we have one coming up for Winter Haven that's in a weird time frame. I'll let you.
Yes, ma'am. So
Elaborate.
there are, Madam Chair, members of the board, later, when I'm asked if there are any changes or revisions to the agenda, there are several that is included in there. Part of the reason why I would not normally, this was slated to come in December because the timeline in which it was submitted, but because it's out-of-state travel, asking them to delay till December 9th for a trip that occurs December 18th, they'll incur double, if not triple, the airfare costs. And this is being sponsored by an external sponsor. So we're actually bringing it before the board as a matter of transparency, because by and large, because it's not a district-sponsored event nor a district-funded event, it ordinarily would not have to come before the board. But again, in a matter of transparency, I want to make sure that you were included. So that would be something amended in the subsequent meeting this evening for the board meeting, so that you'll be able to have discussion about it and address it if need be.
And I just want to say thank you for that, because I never want bureaucracy to get in the way of students being able to do something really cool. So just thank you to the superintendent for allowing that to come tonight, so our basketball players can go play in Seattle in the freezing December, which sounds like a ball.
Thank you. Any other questions up through item Q on the consent agenda? If not, we move to our action agenda, item R. Any questions on the two items coming before us this evening for a vote? Dr. Allen?
Sure, and item 2, I know that was meant to be discussed in work session, and I don't think we got to that one. Is that true?
You may present the item. It was shared.
Oh, okay.
And if I missed it as a part of the presentation, I did. So I apologize, but we are following our protocol. The new established protocol and policy that was adopted by the board. When a request comes in, it formally goes to the board member. The board member then notifies myself. Ms. Dodge and others do their review, and so there is a request to rename the media center at Cleveland Court Elementary School, and the board will be voting on that this evening.
Great. I just want to give a couple comments to that. I'm not sure if you guys had a chance to read that letter. So, thanks to Dr. Henry for moving that initiative forward, Principal Rutenbar as well, and recognizing outstanding service. What was intriguing about the story of Mrs. Fowler, at the time when we're typically ramping up for retirement, which that would be Sarah Beth Wyatt very soon, right? You're thinking about retirement? No. So at the age of 62 is when she started to work for the district as a para. And then she worked 35 years, which I thought was extremely impressive. And then even after retiring within the district, she was then volunteering on site. And then obviously COVID took place and was not able to serve in that capacity. And then she passed in December 19th of 2020 at the age of 93. So I definitely thought that she was a very positive role model for others and exhibited a commitment to excellence in serving our district. So I think it's a great recommendation from Principal Rutenbar.
Thank you so much, Dr. Allen. Mr. Wilson?
I would offer that Dr. Allen be able to make those comments at the board meeting tonight as well. I think that's
absolutely
would be certainly appropriate.
Okay, any other comments on our action agenda items? Okay, moving on. The next item is our public hearing. We have 4 updates on our board policies. Any questions on any of the 4 that we'll be voting on this evening? Okay, next we have our legal reports. And Mr. Bridges, it looks like you have 2 different items for presentation this evening.
Yes, ma'am. The first is authority to advertise a public notice for public hearing on December 14th for policy changes to policy number 1420, which is benefits for administrative staff, 4420 benefits for support staff, 1430.03 sick leave for administrative staff, and 4430.03 sick leave for support staff. And the Second item that I have is what I mentioned earlier. It's in relation to the refinance of the certificates of participation. The board has historically, for many years, been represented by the law firms of Holland and Knight and Neighbors Giblin in connection with those transactions. Those are large firms, and they represent a lot of clients. And each firm, before they undertake a representation, they run what they call a conflicts checklist to see if they have any potential conflicts. And these firms both represent PNC Bank in this and other transactions. They have represented to us that they will be able to competently and diligently represent both clients, and have requested waiver of the conflicts, potential conflicts, which is specifically authorized by the ethical standards governing attorneys. They have made full disclosure of the potential conflicts and obtained waivers from each of them have obtained waivers from PNC Bank, and they have both represented that they will continue to maintain the confidentiality of each client separately. We have done this in the past as a matter of routine, and I would recommend that you authorize the execution of those waivers.
Thank you so much, Mr. Bridges.
Yes,
Anyone
ma'am.
have any questions regarding those two items? Okay. Next, we would normally have our auditor's report, but it doesn't look like we have a report this evening, correct? Thank you, Ms. Matthews. Okay, and then we'll have our board member reports, public comments. So that concludes our review of our agenda for this evening. Is there any board comments that want to be shared this afternoon? Okay, seeing none, then I think we will reconvene, Mr. Superintendent, at 4 o'clock for discipline hearing.
That is correct.
Okay, so our work session is completed for today, and we'll see the board back for discipline at 4 p.m., and then the regularly scheduled board meeting will begin promptly at 5 p.m. this evening. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I would note for the record and the folks who are present that